Everyone. It's overwhelming to see that so many people are joining on Sunday. Definitely, there are a lot of things to do now. Things have opened up, things have started. But let me tell you this, the name China itself, whatever the China do, said and done, it creates a lots of interest. The name itself is creating interest, I would say, because it covers up with a, there is one thing clear with the China, that it keeps us curious and engaged for sure. Being world's second biggest economy and manufacturing hub of the world, or taking U-turn on Hong Kong and Gulwan Valley, leaving apart the corona. To me, I feel that year 2020 would be the China's year for the world news. So whatever we hear today is most of the China's news. Be apart what is happening in Iran now, what is happening in Nepal, somehow we can connect it with China. Tariff wars with US, aggression on Indian borders, dispute with Japan on islands, even dispute with Bhutan, which is supposed to be the happiest country. They have even disputes there also. So fortunately for us, it's India's good opportunity, a window which has been opening for us. And today's discussion, we would love to have a discussion more about it, that how we can actually make it sure, or India as such can, I would say leverage would be a bit tricky word, but still, can we leverage on what has been a sentiment which is going around against China? And let me also discuss, probably after the discussion will come out, there might not be that kind of big sentiment which we see from our social media or the news which is telling us. So that is there sentiment like that overall world? And if it is, what is the opportunity which brings for India? And this biggest question today for us is, can we overall come out and not be like what has been done by US as a bullying power, or China is trying to do the same way? When India emerges to it, can we be a better player in the world international scene and international diplomacy? To start with us, and the best way to answer this is we have the expert panelist. To start with Mr. M.L Kumawat. He's a former Special Secretary Internal Security, Government of India, former Director General of Border Security Force of India. After retiring from police service, he became the chairman of State Public Service Commission, and further he founded Sardar Patel University of Police and Criminal Justice. I would say I don't see any better person to talk about the border disputes and border things. The man who himself has guarded India and secured us for a long number of years, and who is a career police officer, so seen internal security, how it's been disturbed by outside aggressions also. So we welcome you, sir, and look forward to listen to you. And then we have Ambassador Gurjit Singh. His Excellency is a biggest supporter for the students, I would say, and the ideas. I have seen it personally from my side. Ambassador Gurjit Singh is a former ambassador to Germany, Indonesia, Ethiopia, Republic of Djibouti. Is also former representative of India to African Union and the other parts of Union Habitat and UN also. So if you see, we will be having a tremendous experience behind the questions which we're going to raise, and Ambassador Gurjit Singh can definitely throw a light. And it's glad to know that Ambassador Gurjit Singh is also now professor at IIT Indore. So it's glad to see two career diplomats and bureaucrat turning into an academician, not politician. So that's a great, I would say, it's a good learning for the students now, which we all can learn, and the students too. Next in the list, last but not the least, Dr. Maximilian von Laer. He's a project manager, Asia and Africa, Bertelsmann Stiftung. He's also co-founder of and the co-chairman of Executive Committee of Indo-German Young Leaders Forum. He has done his doctorate on China's trade policy. Herr von Laer has studied in India when his father was posted in German embassy in India. Further, he spent a year in India teaching Indian students in slums of Delhi. Not to leave him, on that part, I would rather say he speaks Hindi fluently, and the good part is he has a different love for India and who has done research on China. So I don't think a better person could give an outside, I would say not outsider, because Max, it's difficult to call you an outsider now, or in foreign view. Rather, I would love to know from your side that European Union and Germany, how the stand is there on this particular topic. So we welcome you, Max.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining. Okay, so now not wasting further time, I'll just give you the brief about it, how we're going to deal in next 1 hour. We'll be having 2 rounds of questions in which our expert panelists will give us answers, which will be around 10 to 12 minutes for each questions. Then we'll be allowing our participants to come live and ask questions directly. And that you need to wave your hand so that our IT team can bring you live and send you immediate link, or this can bring you live immediately. On the other part of it, we also need to have discussions on which is thought-provoking discussion, so you can have questions to either direct to each panelist or to all panelists, but you have to do it on your own words. To start with now, without wasting more time, my first question to Mr. Kumawat. Sir, it's a very important thing which we are discussing today, but it always comes to a mind why this dispute is there. And if this dispute is there, how long we require to resolve it? So is there something technical flaws which has been there since beginning, which we are not able to solve today? Or this conflict goes on for ages, you know? How do you see this? So we would love to have a light on that particular part, because many of students can get benefit who has just learning about Indo-China's relations.
Thank you, Dr. Vishnu, for giving this opportunity to interact with students and people from across the globe. And fellow panelists, good afternoon to you all, and to all. The question that you have posed, that why are we in conflict with China? The principal reason, I think you all know, is the border dispute. And my background is that of border management. And here I would like to quote from our one viceroy. We had Lord Curzon. He was invited by Oxford University to give a lecture. It's biennial lecture, a romance lecture. I think it's a great lecture. It's available on the internet also. And this is during his time only, 1914. To begin with, 1904, that British mission to Lhasa started, and a colonel called Young Husband, he was sent there, which led to massacre of about 700 Tibetans also. But that's long history. Let me come back to China first. China, I think, because there are many students who would like to know China. This word China comes from one dynasty, Qin dynasty, which was there. You know, a contemporary of Qin dynasty was Ashoka the Great we had in India. And it was named after that Qing dynasty, this word China came. But most Europeans know China by word named Cathay. And right now we have one Cathay Pacific Airline, which is a flag carrier of Hong Kong. So China is known by Qin in India, and China in English, and Cathay also by Europeans. So that's about China. But interesting thing I must tell you about when the Tang dynasty, which was again in 7th century. This dynasty ruled, or rather it has authority even over Indonesia and Cambodia and many other parts of Asia. This history is important because China lives in the past and acting, you know, right now to almost redeem, it feels the glory that it had lost. It's many centuries of humiliation, especially after Opium War in 19th century, 1852, that it lost Hong Kong, it lost, Shanghai and other things. So now, frontier is the main reason why in India we have problem, because a term I think people know, irredentism. It wants to recapture those areas which it feels that they belong to China, and ultranationalism. And right now, China's trajectory, you know, economic trajectory, we all see. So this is the period of from humiliation to rejuvenation period. And China has again, we have seen in Doklam, or recently in these 3 areas that we are seeing the conflict. So it is the frontier issue which is the main reason why we are having this conflict. It has not been resolved, and it is the legacy of the British. The McMahon Line, which was created by the British, it was never acknowledged or recognized by China. Initially, even Dalai Lama 13, Dalai Lama also did not recognize this. Now Tibetans do recognize that, but as of now, only what we have, LAC, line of actual control, is the line which I think we are trying to have monitor that or manage that. But importance of borders in life of a nation. Again, I draw your attention to Roman's lecture, in which Curzon said that citizens are ready to die for maintaining sanctity of borders. That's true of every nation, and it is in fact the casus belli, the prime reason or the principal reason for which there can be war between nations, and we are also in the similar situation. And borders, as I think most people know, borders have not been drawn in very peaceful or very detailed or very comprehensive manner. We need to have knowledge of cartography, we need to have knowledge of anthropology, of history, and many other things, diplomacy. As you know, this McMahon line was also drawn on a map which was not a very detailed map, and that's why there are reasons for conflict that we have now with China. So another thing which comes out, how this thing can be resolved, or why it has not been resolved in last 7 decades. As I mentioned already, irredentism or ultranationalism, you can say on both sides there is no give and take, or statesmanship is required to solve border disputes. And I hope in near future or during the lifetime of our students who are watching this program, this very complex, daunting challenge, I think, will be resolved. So this is what I'll say in my initial remarks for what this problem is and why we have conflict with China. It is border dispute, which is very difficult to resolve, because unless nations believe in give and take, unless we have great statesmen, unlike some politicians, I think such problems continue for ages or rather generations. So thank you, Mr. Vishnu.
So just to have a supplementary question for that, does this issue also, does the issue with China also poses an internal security for us, or it's just on the borders?
It is not only external threat. In case those who have some information or knowledge about one of the insurgencies that India has been facing is Naxalism. This problem started in 1967, and that point of time it was Mao Zedong who was their leader. He openly supported Naxalism, and he's called a prairie fire. He wished, he actually, you can say, abetted that Naxalism should spread all over India. And that time, that was active assistance. China, Peking radio used to speak about the Naxal movement which was there. And we are having these things on record that China was abetting Naxalism. And even before that, our problem of Nagaland, which is called the mother of insurgencies, has also been, China has been responsible for providing arms and sanctuaries to our those insurgent leaders. Even right now, we have a ceasefire with a group that NSC and I am what we call. And recently, the governor of Nagaland, he mentioned that they are indulging in collection of money, extortions, and some leaders have left. And there is, I think, new media reports say that they have gone to China. A few years back, some consignment of arms which came from China was seized also. So they have been fishing in troubled water on our eastern, our northern borders. So there is internal security dimension to the problem that we have with China. Hello.
Vishnu, you're on mute.
Vishnu?
My next question is to Ambassador, sir. The recent conflict with China has made the diplomacy more difficult. A study conducted in 2015 to check the percentage of people on the other side of countries, it showed that 45% of Indians don't trust China, and 36% of people of China don't trust Indians. So I personally believe this percentage must have increased in many folds. If you see in the recent years, when we have social media, WhatsApp messages, we see the videos of our soldiers and stone pelting on Indian and Chinese soldiers were doing. So this must have increased. So my question comes from this, sir. Do you think that diplomatic channels take a back step with the sentiments which has been developed in the nations, both the nation, I would rather say, and at the same time, does this sentiment of which has been circulated in a big way hurt the diplomatic channels to ensure peace? Which anyways, I also remember Mr. Kumawat always telling you that after war there is diplomacy, so why not have diplomacy before it? So while quoting him, I would say, what do you think about it, and how diplomacy becomes more difficult in these times, and how as a diplomat you handle these situations?
Thank you, Dr. Ramdeo. I'm very happy to join my senior, Mr. Kumawat, and our dear friend, Dr. Maximilian von Laer, on this very unique occasion. And I'm very grateful that your organization has decided to put this together, despite it being a Sunday and in difficult times. I think besides managing diplomacy, these days we also have to manage webinars. There are so many that you need to make sure that you need to pay attention to the right one. So I'm very happy to be part of this. You have an interesting question, and you can answer it in many ways. So let me try. War is the end of diplomacy. But sometimes war is an instrument of diplomacy. Most people in the past believed that diplomacy was an instrument of war. But to be honest, I think that a good diplomat is the one who has to make sure that relations between countries don't break down. In the old days, breakdown meant going to war. So you had to work in a way that you did not allow your countries to go to war, which meant you manage the relationship through your personality, through your information, through your style, and most of all, by managing perceptions. Now, in the old days, when your home government did not know much about what's happening in, let us say, in Berlin, till the ambassador's letter reached them, are now gone. In those days, perceptions were much easier to manage. But today, when the internet is rampant and so is social media, information flows are much faster than diplomatic communications. By the time you encrypt your diplomatic cable, the headquarters already know what happened. So we have to shift from an information-based system to a perception management and analysis arrangement for diplomats. What happens now is that we use the word quiet diplomacy. Why do we say quiet diplomacy? Actually, diplomacy was always quiet. It became the word quiet was added on because now we have something called public diplomacy. Public diplomacy is how do you present your relationship to the people. Now, this year, I think was, if I'm not wrong, the 70th year of India-China diplomatic relations. But given the situation, so there was a huge public diplomacy events around that 70th year, much would have happened. But thanks to Chinese behavior and Corona, today that public diplomatic angle has been pushed to the side. And today you are left to do perception management. Now, what happens to a diplomat in such situations is that he is faced with a situation which is warlike. Therefore, what does he do? He has to keep the relationship with the Chinese Foreign Office open, with the Chinese Communist Party open, with the Chinese Military Commission open, in fact, with as many Chinese institutions as possible. It is much easier for the Chinese ambassador in India because he has free access to the press. Whereas for the Indian diplomats in China, there is no such access. So you may have noticed that recently there was a controversy in India when an Indian news agency interviewed the Chinese ambassador. But the Indian ambassador had no such opportunity to talk in the Global Times about what India feels. So this asymmetry of power is also an asymmetry of perception. So the role of a diplomat is to keep all channels open, excuse me, and to faithfully convey what the government's position is. This becomes all the more difficult when there are public demonstrations in your country condemning, let us say, China or Chinese goods or Chinese attacks. So when these are happening, the attention does get diverted. So your challenge is how to keep it focused, knowing full well that in good times, the same public sympathy you would have used for public diplomacy, but today it is coming in the way of your quiet diplomacy. Second, you also have to now look at the diplomacy you do with the other big powers who are your friends, because each one of them has a different view on your engagement with China. Now, if you see the statements coming out of Washington are different from the statements coming out of Tokyo, statements from coming out of Australia, and the near silence coming out of Berlin. All different, all meant to be your friends. So the role of the Indian diplomat in the United States is to go to Congress, is to go to the State Department, it goes to all the other departments, Pentagon, and rustle up so that they take a position vis-a-vis China, which is sympathetic to us. At the same time, in Japan and very largely in Germany, you have to go and cajole them. Come on, say something. Your friend is having a problem. Why don't you say something? But each of them says, no, I am having a trade relationship which I don't want to disturb. And then you think, am I talking to Tokyo or am I talking to Malaysia? So at such moments, the power symptom is very difficult to grasp. And this is where your openness and availability to talk to all kinds of people becomes very important. Third is, let us take now the diplomacy in India's neighborhood. Now, this is the area where China is continuously pushing. You can see over the last 10 years or so, China has pushed in so much infrastructure funding into India's neighborhood that India is no more the only power in South Asia. China has become a real power. So whether you call it string of pearls or you call it BRI, basically altogether, Chinese are pumping in more money than India can. And today, the nature of relationship has become very transactional. Today, people don't say, let's say Nepal, they don't remember how many dams we have built and how much power we buy and pay them, or the open border that we have, or the trade and transit to the sea. They think China is their best friend today. So you have to manage these situations without being patronizing and going back on the defensive on the past. You have to say, I am as good as my promise today. And you have to hold your promise vis-a-vis the Chinese promise and make them understand why this is better. When hard power is being utilized, the job of the Indian diplomat, depending on soft power, becomes all the more difficult. For instance, Nepal, we are talking of roti beti ka rishta, the rishta of cultural relationships. They are trying to break every relationship. Now, how long will you keep talking of soft power when you really need to actually exercise hard power? This is where I have given you now three different aspects. Indian diplomacy in China, Indian diplomacy in friendly, powerful countries, and Indian diplomacy in neighboring countries. I would like to add one thing to what Mr. Kumawat said. Till Maharaja Ranjit Singh's time, India and Tibet actually had no interaction. It is Maharaja Ranjit Singh's forces which actually went into Tibet, and later the Dogra General Zorawar Singh from the Jammu area, Leh area. These people actually opened up the paths to Tibet and the Tibet route to Nepal. Till 1950, India had no border with China and Ladakh. It is only when the Chinese gobbled up Tibet that they became our neighbor. Now, a border issue between neighbors with Tibet was perhaps more manageable. Tibet was not going to build a road across Aksai Chin, but China is. Tibet would not have built a CPEC in Pakistan and through Indian occupied, Indian claimed Kashmir, our Kashmir, but China is. So this is how the power mechanics changes. So what the Indian diplomat in Lhasa would have done in 1949 and what in the Indian diplomat in Beijing has to do in 2020 is totally changed by circumstances. And therefore, it is good to remember our history, but we need to be alive to the dynamics of modern history being made before us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's the beauty of this discussion is like, from internal security and borders, we reach to the diplomacy. Now we have a third speaker who can actually give us a view from the European view, which he's sitting over there. So I would say, Max, I would love to ask you this, and I'll start with a very simple question. EU has just held two digital summits, one with China on June 22nd and the one with India just last Wednesday on 15th. So what was the outcome of these if you have followed those one? And the conflict between India and China, how it has been perceived in Europe? So that's the biggest question, because if you see in my stay in Europe, I always found that there is always hint of tilt towards China. So as China being as an investment destination and India is a big market, that's what the view Europe has already always had. Do you think its time has come to reverse it or start balancing it, at least for the European players?
Yeah, thank you, Vishnu. Thanks for the question. Thank you so much for having invited me. I also want to say my personal greetings once again to Mr. Kumawat, sir, and Ambassador Gurjit Singh. It's my great pleasure to be here with you, and I'm a little humbled, not a little actually, to be part of a panel with you. We've known each other for quite a while, and it's a great pleasure to be here and be able to discuss this very important issue today. I obviously am not an expert on the Indo-Chinese border dispute. I follow whatever I can get in terms of news, of course, but I might add a bit of value, as Vishnu said, in tipping in the European perspective. So Vishnu, as you just described, there are two summits that have just happened. One was the one between the European Union and China that happened in late June. Actually, one must know that there was a very big summit planned for September, the EU-China summit in Leipzig in Germany. That was to be one of the highlights of the German presidency of the European Council. And this meeting was now postponed due to Corona. Now, it was officially postponed due to Corona, but observers are more or less agree that at least the European side was pretty happy. They had this reason to postpone the summit. They had wanted to sign a big investment deal with China. That was not ready. They had wanted to discuss several important issues, but honestly, who can or wants to openly discuss critical issues also in the light of what happened last year, for example, in Hong Kong problems or the upheaval started last year already. There was the Corona outbreak with still some questions being asked about the initial handling of it by China. There were many pushes by China in the immediate neighborhood. The India-China skirmish is just the latest, basically, in a long line of things that have happened. Last but not least, rumors, or even more than that, of how China is treating minorities in different regions, be it the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, be it people in Tibet. So the European side was pretty, I would say, nobody would officially say it, of course, but was not unhappy they could postpone the summit. So what happened? is they did an online summit, as everybody does today in late June, but different to earlier meetings, actually no joint statement happened afterwards. So apparently sides could not really agree on things that they would make public that they have agreed upon, which usually should be all too complicated between two partners. You almost be aware that Europe has recently found a new description of China for this rather difficult relationship. Now it's handled as a rival, a partner, and a competitor. So these are kind of three dimensions of the same medal, so to speak. And in this very diplomatically very difficult relationship, because you must not forget Europe is very much dependent on trade with China. A lot of business is done with China. Many German car companies, for example, depend on the business in China. So China is very important for Europe in that regard, but more and more it's also understood that things cannot move on the way they have until now. So as I said, the summit had not a very did not have a joint statement as an outcome. I found one quote that I wanted to read out to you in this regard. Actually, there was a statement by the heads of Europe after the summit, so no joint statement, but a statement that said, engaging and cooperating with China is both an opportunity and a necessity. But at the same time, we have to recognize that we do not share the same values, political systems, or the same approach to multilateralism. We will engage in a clear-eyed and confident way, robustly defending EU interests and standing firm on our values. So this was a pretty latent statement. Now let me move on to the second summit that happened just last Wednesday, actually. It was the EU-India summit, which finally happened. It had been postponed a few times. It was the 15th of it. There had been a stop after 13, 14, I'm not entirely sure, for a few years it did not happen. 17, it happened again. And now in March this year, it was supposed to happen, but was postponed due to Corona. Modi was supposed to come to Brussels in March. So now on 15th of July, this meeting happened, and it this time resulted actually in a joint statement. This one resulted in a joint statement. It was very, very cordial. Main part of it was actually the agreement on a high-level dialogue on trade and investment, something that is like one step on the way to a free trade agreement, while everybody agrees that we are still far away from a free trade agreement, which is something that everybody in Europe hopes for, and probably India actually too. So this is something that will really bring relations forward. But many other aspects were discussed too, and were advanced upon too, like artificial intelligence, green energy, and so on. And there was even a EU-India strategic partnership roadmap to 2025 published. So that's good steps, some advancement, and a much friendlier tone, one must say. So now I've talked a lot. Vishnu, could you please remind me of the second part of your question? What was it?
We would love to know from you, what is the people's sentiment, because you must be meeting your friends and people around you.
Yeah.
So what are people feeling? So is that India feeling is there?
Yeah. So one thing that is very important to understand when you think about how Europe views India-China relations is that Europe really is not an immediate neighbor of China. That's no surprise here, but that's often forgotten. So from an India perspective, India has to deal with China very differently from the way that Europe needs to or can deal with China. So for people in Europe, even though they obviously agree or understand the global importance of the issue, it is still a more remote issue than it would be if you have China as our direct neighbor. So that makes the conflict a little less immediate, but it is obviously followed strongly. People are very skeptical. It's very different actually. So you couldn't really say that there's one opinion amongst people. Many people see China as an important partner, but if they see it as a partner, they mostly refer to it in an economic sense. Trade with China is far, far bigger than it is with India, and has been so for a long time. Obviously, China's rise started earlier and it opened up earlier to the world economy, so that's no surprise there. India is mostly seen as a very friendly country, as a good partner country. Many people refer to it as at least in Germany, it's said it's a very cordial but sometimes a little boring relationship, because we don't actually fight over stuff, but more could happen. But people watch closely, of course, what is happening between India and China, and this I have a feeling that we're just seeing the start of many things that will happen and that will play a very important role in this relationship. Let's think of India and China within global value chains. Many inputs for Indian pharmaceuticals, for example, coming from China but going from India to the rest of the world. Let's think of the role of ICT value chains, 5G, for example. How will the countries position themselves? How will countries decide on whether to let Huawei, for example, join in their networks and so on? So summing up, India is perceived as very friendly, but one must say people also look at recent developments in India critically. Many don't understand a lot of what's happening. It's not by far not as present in the German media as China is. But I think that most of things are yet to come and yet to be observed by us. Yes, let me finish here. I'll be happy to reply to further questions.
Thanks, Max. I think before moving to the second round, it would be not good if we don't ask Ambassador Sir to just sum it up, because this question also pertains to his experience, which he has seen in Germany. And it was not way back, it's just a few years back. So he understands that situation and he has seen from both sides. Would be love to hear from you, sir, for 1 or 2 minutes, and then we go to second round.
Thank you, Dr. Ramdeo. So now that I am not a diplomat, I spend my time talking truthfully and brutally, hoping that quiet diplomacy will then take advantage and do something on many things that I could not do when I was doing quiet diplomacy. And dealing with Germany and Europe is one of those difficult things. So let's take the summit, India-EU 15 summit, which took place on the 15th of July. Now, Dr. Maximilian von Laer has very factually said everything. I have no dispute with it. But let me tell you a perception in India. Prime Minister Modi at the summit spoke about the difficulties we are having with China in Ladakh. He explained the Galwan incident. The only thing the Europeans had to say was about the CAA application and the conversion of J&K into union territory. Not a word on China. Now, this is creating a wrong perception in India. I don't know wrong or right, but this is the perception in India. That when we talk of China, you only want to talk about our internal matters and you don't want to say anything about China. So this perception is gaining ground every day. I have written 2 essays recently. Both will come out next week. One is on how the EU is trying to manage China and the United States at the same time. The second one is on the summit. And I have tried to bring this out that, we are talking about green economy, 5G, technology, common principles. So with India, we have a preferred partnership, whereas China is a systemic rival of the EU, according to the EU. But when it comes to having a partnership, it is almost entirely with China, and the Indian side is empty. It's an empty glass. This perception is very strong in India now, that this is the time Europe and India need to work on reforming multilateralism, getting China, the USA and others to abide by international rules. Yet we ourselves are not on the same page. So that is my take on the 2 summits.
Thank you, sir. So now we go to the second round, and probably I would rather like to bring Kumawat's expertise after his retirement from the police service, being an academician. So, sir, it's a very simple, but it's very complicated answer I would expect from you, because it's more of a sentiment and the students. So we are nearly 20,000 students who are doing their higher education studies in China, although the numbers are a little lesser when we came Chinese doing studies in India. Now, with this ongoing conflict of boycotting China on social media, how do you see this is possible for these students to forego their studies because of some sentiment which has been there? Secondly, how do you see them? Because if I would have been doing my studies in China, and there are some people who would tell it to me that don't do it in China, or those kind of messages. So how is this state of things, and can we stop our complete education and things over there looking at the social media?
Dr. Vishnu, to your very difficult question, especially when we have anti-China sentiments in our country, to say whether our students should terminate their studies in China, I'll say we should take a very pragmatic view. And since they are in their third year or fourth year or first or second year, what I don't know, these 20,000 students, they must continue their studies in China. Otherwise, their future or the parents' investment in their education will be at peril. And why we should learn more about China, or we send our students to China even during this period of hostility, I think is very important. Let me take some points from their great book, The Art of War. The Art of War is a very interesting book, which tells us why we need to know even about our adversary or our enemy or any challenge that we face. I will quote from that. It has 3 points. It says, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. So in case China is our adversary right now, you have to know China more than I think, as you know, during the peacetime. And second, it says, if you know yourself, but not enemy, for every victory gained from will also suffer a defeat. And the third one, if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. So I hope you got the point. This is the time when we should know about China, why China has made great progress, especially since 1980s, how they have invested in education, how they have invested in their human resource, how they have adopted the technology, how they got investment from other countries, how they created an ambience or ecosystem where the things made in China are, other countries are not able to compete with them. So I think this is the time we should learn more about them. And here I can tell you one interesting thing. China, with its economic, background that it has now, it had 600 Confucius centers world over. Even in India, we have a few centers. In Bombay University has a Confucius center through which they are trying to spread Chinese soft power. So I think we should learn Chinese, Mandarin language. We should know more about China. And as far as students who are there right now, they must pursue their studies. And this anti-China sentiment that we have, we should leverage in the manner that we create similar or rather better ecosystem in our country that we can give value for money. Our products are in demand world over. I think we should be able to compete with China. That should be, I think, our approach. And why our students, in fact, go to China? We have about 950 universities in our country. At the time of independence, we had only 16, but they are not sufficient. Especially if we talk of technical education, we have shortfall of 750,000 doctors in our country. And our medical colleges or our technical university that we have, they are not able to provide doctors that we need in our country. So where do they go? They go to Central Asia, they go to China, they go again in comparison with Europe or in comparison with US. I think education is much cheaper there. That's why they go there. So I think it is in our advantage that our students go there and learn, because right now I think everybody will agree that China is having edge over India. So we should learn about their techniques, technology. We should learn about their how they created ecosystem. The very fact that China also sent about 100,000 teachers from China to US to learn about higher education. So, same way, I think, though China and US are not having a great relationship, but they are studying in US, and US also, I think there are many US people in China. So I think we should not have knee-jerk reaction and ask our students to terminate their studies. Rather, we should try to know more about China, and that will help our anti-China sentiment that we have. We can increase our knowledge, and that will really help our nation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's a wonderful answer to the students who are thinking in a double-minded now, because what to take. Then the question comes again from moving from the students. My question to Ambassador sir would be: we had a very ambitious project like Make in India. I would call it ambitious now because at that point of time it looks like reality, but we did not succeed in the similar manner which we thought or which we envisaged. Do you think the time for India has come now? And if we approach little more harder now, probably we will be able to get better success than the previous years. I would simply put again, although at the end of the day, people will say commerce matters. So if there's a lot of investment already made in China, but then there is also, if you see lots of investment in last 3 months has come to India, Facebook, Google investing in India, and the other companies too. So should we see that this is again a window which is open for us to leverage on the sentiment, which is because of Corona or aggression, whatever it we call, but that's a window for us. And if it is, then how we can actually leverage on that?
Thank you, Dr. Ram. Can I just add something to what Mr. Kumawat said about students in China?
So
there are about 25,000 Indian students in China. 85% of them study medicine. Why do they study medicine there? Because they are unable to compete with the severe competition in India. And because they can't get in, then they all go to these kind of countries, in Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan. Because I've got so many messages recently, sir, can you get me evacuated from Kyrgyzstan? What are you doing in Kyrgyzstan? I'm a medical student. Now, the problem is, once you study there, whether in China, they will not let you work there as a doctor, even though you have studied there. When you come back to India, you can't work here because ICMR has not yet clarified the rules for foreign trained doctors. So this is really a mug's game. Now, the same problem afflicts Indian students who go to the USA. You are having so many problems on visas there now. And the USA also will not let you work there by curtailing H-1B. So therefore, students from India should be involved in Indian service. The Make in India has to begin in their minds. And if you don't get admission, you should be put into compulsory national service for 2 years and serve the country. Go as a block development officer, work in the rural area, work in your own country to make things. Now coming to your own question. When Make in India was launched by Prime Minister Modi in 2015, it was essentially an effort to draw investment into India's manufacturing sector. And that worked up to a small extent. It did not work fully. Indian investors themselves preferred to buy from China than invest in India. Solar modules, APIs for pharmaceuticals, These were great manufacturing opportunities, LED bulbs. We didn't grasp them. Same goes in the defense sector. We could have manufactured much, much more. So this emphasis has continued that get foreign technology and manufacture in India, basically the Chinese model. But evidently on ground, our abilities are not the same as the Chinese. If you talk to Japanese investors, they say that India does not have adequately skilled manpower, and our manufacturing capacities are old and need a huge amount of new investment in simply upgrading. The second option on this was, can we become a part of regional value chains? Like Japan has value chains with ASEAN. Japan has value chains with China. But India is not a part of any of these value chains. Once we withdrew from RCEP in 2018, it became clear that we were not looking for tariff concessions to become a part of regional value chain. Once you do that, the interest in your manufacturing now is only for your domestic market, not for your exports. So therefore, we have to be very clear that if we are not going to join the FTAs, then let us simply focus on the domestic market and let us not produce shoddy goods, but produce goods which are export worthy but sold in. Now, we have moved to a new stage called Atmanirbhar Bharat, which means let us work towards self-reliance. So you have mentioned the amount of investment coming into India in recent, let's say, the post-corona period. So you see, India as an investment destination is still good. But people are choosing their sectors. They are choosing technology, startups, the IT space, services sector. The problem is they are not choosing the manufacturing sector, which is where employment generation can take. So this is where we need to link Make in India, Atmanirbhar, the interest of Indian and foreign entrepreneurs, and create a better ecosystem whereby you can work. So if you may remember, in Germany, we have the MIIM, Make in India Mittelstand. I think that worked quite well. And many companies, about 100 companies actually came and started manufacturing or doing services, but at a very small level. We need to scale this up. And the way to scale it up will come now, because many of the things that we import from China, 66% of mobile parts in India are imported from China. Large amount of light electronics is imported. Solar module, the raw materials all come from there. APIs come from there. Auto parts, 37% come from China. So these are the opportunities where we must start manufacturing in India with support of countries like Germany. And we should reduce the duties on technology and equipment from Germany, for instance, and raise it vis-a-vis China, so that we get good technology, but the end product should be still comparable. I think that is where the opportunity needs to be looked at in a policy sense. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So coming to the last question, and then we'll open up for the questions. So all the participants who are there in the Zoom call, please do have the questions ready. And those who are not on the Zoom call, they can send a question to me and I can ask the question. So they are on other platforms of webinar. So the last question to Dr. Maximilian von Laer. Max, this, it would be a bit tricky. I don't know, how do you perceive that way? The current situation and the future trade relation. That's where there comes a question, and nowadays it's very important to have the social media connect, which we have. So let's say WeChat or other things which we have just banned recently. So 59 apps which is of China which has been banned. I would say, personally speaking, I had few friends in China and I'm not able to communicate to them. So that was a channel in which the veil of, although I don't know whether they were always telling me truth because of their, even their messages be checked. But still, I would get to know some part of it. But now that channel has also been broken. So what is the way and how do you see this as such, like this step, would it give us benefit or we are going to lose in that part?
Yes, thanks for this question. It's a very interesting one, actually, and I must must say right away that I won't be able to give an immediate or fully satisfying answers in terms of it will be helpful, not helpful, or good or bad. This banning of 59 Chinese apps was perceived around the globe. Everybody took notice, and it was again an action of a scale that is also only more or less only possible in India. Looked at the time, I looked it up a bit. I think these 59 apps were about 5% of all apps downloaded in India in the last couple of months. So it is a very relevant fraction of technology that was actually cut out of the Indian market. So yeah, that's the first statement. It was a big step. It was also relevant in terms of commercial loss for the Chinese companies involved. It might, I am not able to judge this part though, also be very relevant in terms of commercial loss on the Indian side, not only in advertising and connectivity losses, but also in the longer term sense of employment created, in willingness of companies to invest in India, trust in India as a marketplace, and so on. So these are two aspects of it. From a technology point of view, actually, I think this issue should be looked at a little more carefully. So when we look back a couple of years, or even by now decades, when China banned, for example, Google from its market, they banned not WeChat but WhatsApp from their market. And they banned a few other Western technology companies or software. So what happened? Baidu was created, the Chinese Google. WeChat was created, the Chinese WhatsApp, which is by now even larger, I think, or at least as a one-stop app. It has a tremendous importance in China. So this ban actually enabled domestic innovation and help domestic companies to become big, because the Chinese market is big enough actually for a tech company to really scale up. Though all what I just described is obviously a very difficult trade-off. You might, if in China in India now the same would happen, and domestic tech companies would jump in and replace the spot where TikTok has been, the spot where WeChat has been. I mean, there are other apps that can replace WeChat rather quickly, of course. So if this happens and a dramatic push in domestic innovation happens, and Indian companies come up and fill the void, then this might actually be even a longer term good thing that has happened. But there is definitely a trade-off in terms of trust into the market, and what you just very importantly also mentioned, in terms of loss of connectivity with China. We just, Mr. Kumawat has stated very well earlier that it's so important to be in touch with the neighbor and to understand the neighbor. Now, if we cut all communication levels of channels, not between the governments, of course, but between the people, then the people-to-people connect is far more difficult. And even as Vishnu mentioned, not everybody might have always said the truth. So the communication was kind of monitored in many ways, but this, I would say, is still better than no communication happening at all. But that's, I guess, rather a small aspect of the communication that was cut. The more important bunch is within India. Now, all that I've said is more or less, except for the last aspect, an economic aspect. If you talk in terms of national security, which was the main argument for the banning of these apps, I must say I cannot judge in to what extent this was actually important. I can very well imagine that it was, and I mean even other countries are thinking about banning Chinese technology, not to that extent, but into the same direction. So it's a very difficult and interesting question, and as I said, I cannot say yes or no, a good thing or a bad thing. It really depends on what happens next, whether how much this will influence investor sentiment, foreign direct investment opportunities or willingness for these, and innovation from within India. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see how this evolves.
Thank you, Max. I would give my personal experience on that. I know the Chinese whale, which has been there, and the firewall, which stops all the messages and curtail it. But I still able to get some information about Corona from few of my friends who are there. So at least what's they're going through, which has now stopped. In a way, I feel also that WeChat was only being downloaded in India by most of the people who were doing some business with China. So that's what the people who were actually being in touch with. Otherwise, I don't see WhatsApp was already in the market. So if Indian companies has to come up, they has to come up real big. That vacuum has to be created. So there is actually not a vacuum, it's just a stoppage. But it's a very strong sign from the government of India, which was actually needed at some point of time, that the Chinese governments also feel that we can also take some action. So that's a good blow, I would rather say. So to sum up this, I would suggest rather we should take questions first, and then we quickly sum up in the last. So to the IT team, can you make anyone who has first asked, raised hand to bring them live?
Yeah, we have 3 questions. Now I'm promoting Dr. Pranita Medi to panelists.
Okay. Yeah, and all the people who are asking questions, just give a quick intro of yours and try to keep the question short. And if it is directed to any of the speakers, please mention that too.
Yeah, Dr. Pranita is here. You can unmute, and you can also on your video too. Yeah, she is.
Yeah. Good evening. Good evening, sir. To
good
all
evening, Dr.
the
Medi.
Yeah.
I would just simply just tell us a bit about you, like a small introduction, and from where you're joining. That could be also good. Which part of India, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah. Good evening. I'm Pranita, Dr. Pranita Medi. I'm from Assam, the northeastern part of India. I've done my PhD in sociology, and currently I'm working with government of Assam. So firstly, I'd like to say that it has been a great pleasure to listen to the experts speak on this very important and pertinent topic. So a big thank you to all of you at the beginning. So this question, my question is basically to Sir Kumawat sir and Ambassador Gurjit Singh sir. So we all know of the huge volume of bilateral trade as well as the strategic partnership of India-China in the Eastern Hemisphere of the world. We also know that we have seen experienced border tensions from Ladakh to Arunachal Pradesh. In the past, many a times it was officially stated that border issues will never be an obstacle between the economic relations between both the countries. But looking at China's defense strategies of encircling the entire northern border as well as the northeastern border of India, coupled with several accusations of sponsoring terrorism into the northeast, because Kumawat sir had already talked about NSCN part, every now and then skirmishes in Ladakh, Sikkim as well as Arunachal Pradesh, can we actually envisage of maintaining a cordial relationship with China only to maintain strategic relations in the Eastern Hemisphere to boldly compete the West? This is my question to Sir Kumawat sir and Sir Gurjit Singh sir. Thank you.
We start with Sir Kumawat sir to start with.
I think the young lady has asked very difficult question: how to balance, our national security or external security, and at the same time have trade, or is it possible? Here I would like to say that even this situation also, we should, as you know, we have trade war and we also have border war, or you may say, border conflict. I think sagacity lies in having trade even at the time of war also, because after all, in trade also, the country which has got better trade, more trade, I think will be economically well off. So as far as China is concerned, there is so much investment in India. It's almost, I think, say 26 billion US dollar investment is there in India. And today only, I think, if you see the newspapers, Chabahar, that project was their road project from Iran to Afghanistan. I think India has almost lost it because China is going to invest $400 billion in Iran. So we cannot at the same time, ignore our trade or investment in India, in case we take a pragmatic view. And these aspects of national security, where China is trying to, fish in troubled water, especially in the northeast, or add terrorists, especially in Nagaland or other borders states that we have. I think both should continue at the same time, that we deal with them also, and our trade should continue with China. And as Ambassador Gurjit Singh said, I think this is the right time when we think of what the things which are being produced in China, why can't they be produced here in India? Why education cannot be made cheaper, available for our students in India? Why they have to go to Central Asian countries or China? So these are the things I think we cannot see from only one prism. We will have to see through several prisms to see what actually is good for our nation. I think I have satisfied you, but it's a very difficult question, and it's very difficult to give a straight answer to the question that you have asked.
Thank you.
Thank you. You see, from 1988, Indian policy towards China following Rajiv Gandhi's visit was one of kind of keep the border on one side and let us progress on other sides, in the hope that that will create a good relationship in the shadow of which a border agreement could be signed. Now, from 1988 to 2020, there actually was no fighting on the border. So whatever be the benefits or not of that policy, let's concede that there was no hot war. There were no casualties. So, but in this time, trade and investment relations grew, and as Kumawat ji said, China has a huge advantage over us. Today, China has a $55 billion trade surplus with us. And the problem is not having a trade surplus. Problem is not compensating it through tourism, investment, or opening up their market to items of our interest. They, in fact, do the opposite. They create non-tariff barriers to our trade. They don't let their tourists come to India on a preferred basis. They only want to invest where they want to invest, not where we want them to invest. So today, when after the Galwan incident, where actually people have died on the border, I think the time has come to totally rethink our relationship with China. We have to understand that there is a total asymmetry, whether it is economy, defense, political power, whatever. China today is an aggressive power ready after Corona to take on the world on its own terms. It wants to declare hegemony. It wants to declare hegemony and eat up our land. Secondly, it does not want to concede anything on the economy. And third, it wants to infiltrate our country through, investments in startups, in fintech, in all kinds of apps, as we have discussed. So we have to think of a total reset of the relationship. Now, by reset, I don't mean you cut the cord and stop all imports. I don't mean that. Because when you stop all imports, what happens is that Indian importers have paid for the import and now cannot get the goods. This is a reality. So we also don't want to bust the contracts. We don't want to defy the WTO rules. After all, we are calling for a rules-based model. What we need to do is start reducing dependence on China. And I gave some examples of how Make in India can be done by beginning with those items which we import the most from China. Don't stop contracts in one day, but over the next 4 or 5 years, work with partners like Germany and Japan to build your own strength, even if you need to buy something which is more expensive, but start reducing dependence. Bring your own value chain. Don't be a part of a Chinese value chain. And third, remove them from infrastructural contacts, from 5G, from telecommunications. Use the might of the Indian market to make sure that the Chinese are shut out. It does not mean close down the investments in making mobile phones. It doesn't mean that. It simply means do not allow more such investment in hard areas like roads, telecom, power, and such things. That is my response. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insightful answers to both of you. Thank you.
Now let's take this next one. You have to unmute yourself for the asking questions.
Good evening, sirs.
Good evening, Vannaji.
Yes, sir. My name is Vandana, and I belong to Indian Police Service and working for the Government of India. And I'm presently posted in Hyderabad, in India. My question, I have two questions. The first question is for Gurjit Singh, sir, and my second question is for both Gurjit Singh, sir, as well as Max. So my first question is, sir, you have briefly touched upon how China is investing in various projects, especially projects relating to infrastructure in Indian neighboring countries. So in such a scenario, and looking at the present standoff, how should India re-strategize its foreign policy amidst growing tensions with its neighbors, especially with Nepal, Sri Lanka?
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Vandana. As I explained in the beginning, China has got much deeper pockets than India has. So what it can fund in any country is much, much more than India can fund. Now, India has funded much more in Bhutan, in Nepal, and Sri Lanka, and Myanmar earlier. But today, we are behind China. So I don't think it should be our policy to try and tell those countries not to borrow money or obtain money from China or whatever. What we should say is that if you are opening your economy to Chinese companies, give us an equal opportunity. Secondly, do not allow the use of your ports, airports, and defense infrastructure for powers that are inimical to India, meaning do not interfere with my security. Now, if you see how Myanmar and Bangladesh have behaved, their relationship with China is very good. China does many projects there, but they welcome Indian projects as well, and they do not threaten your security. The mistake that Maldives and Sri Lanka made earlier was that they bartered the money they were getting from China and also tried to thumb the snook at India, which today they still get the money, but at least they are not being hostile to you. With Nepal, it's a different story. You know, that's the communist government in Nepal fighting for its survival. They are trying to destroy the traditional Indo-Nepalese engagement and create what is called a normal relationship between any two states. But that the Nepalese will suffer, not India in the long run. So I think India is playing the right game by being a little quiet and saying, okay, you have your say. I'm sure that the goodwill that we have will ultimately see you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. My second question is for you, sir, as well as Max may chip in. Recently, the Union Bank of Switzerland gave its report that during the corona pandemic times and post-corona, India is a favorable destination for all those companies who are trying to move away from China. So in the backdrop of that report and the present standoff, is it true that with the pandemic epicenter in China, several MNCs which are operating from China had favored shifting their bases to India, which in their opinion offered a more stable economic climate under Mr. Modi? And the present standoff between India and China was basically to subvert the attention of the companies away from viewing India as a favorable destination. So the present conflict is just not merely a military conflict, but a conflict of business interests between these two countries.
You know, on this, China is so far ahead of India that we really need to gear up our own domestic policy and practice to make sure that foreign and domestic investors both find it conducive to work in India. Now, there are two aspects to it. One, people talk about companies moving out of China. But there is another element. There is a China plus one strategy. Meaning, I will keep China, but I'll also manufacture in some other country to make sure that I'm not totally dependent only on one source. Therefore, I think India should try and become of the China plus one strategy and say yes. But at the moment, even Bangladesh, Vietnam, Thailand are ahead of us. We are not the primary. So why are we not the primary? I think at a policy level, India has done very well to come from somewhere like 120 at to 68th position in the ease of doing business index. But when you talk to foreign investors on the ground, they don't see this really happening. So, madam, you are in Andhra Pradesh, or are you in Telangana? Which one?
Presently in Telangana, sir.
Okay. So, now Telangana has a good reputation of resolving problems on the ground level. So foreign investors like to go there. But UP does not have that reputation. So you have to make sure that it is not the central government policy, but the state level implementation which has to improve and become top class. That is when you will make the change.
Oh, I actually only can second what Ambassador Singh has just said. I do not believe that there's going to be a win for India that comes out of or in relation with a loss for China. It's not going to be the because companies go out of China that they will go to India, but they will go to India because India is a very good investment opportunity for them. And speaking of India as a whole country, in that sense, does not make much sense, as you just said, Ambassador. But you have to keep the regional governments in mind and the state governments in mind. So the loss or the decision of moving out of China will not automatically bring companies or investments to India, but yeah, India just has to keep working, and it has been working on it very hard for the last couple of years. To be a very good investment destination. Then investment will also follow, but the domestic Indian market has to be such that companies want to go there. There's no other way. There's no other way.
I agree.
Thank you, Max. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So before we take the next question, we will have one direct question which has come, but Somi has written. Just I'll read it out. Okay. So Somi Rishabh has asked this question: how do we see the future trade and the current imports from China? We have Chinese raw material in nearly all the basic instruments and the machines, so that will be in the replacement, and when we will be able to succeed in creating the ambitious Make in India and Make in India possible. So I think this question, Ambassador sir has already answered it in a way, but sir, in case he wants to say something more about it, like how do we see that? And then we'll take only one more question and then we'll wrap up the session.
Thank you. What I would like to say is that we need to move in stages. We need to improve our investment profile at the state level, district level. We need to make sure that every investor, domestic or foreign, is happy and his problems are attended to. Once that impression goes that India or the states of India are positively inclined towards investors, more people will come. It is a word of mouth situation. It is not an index. Second part is that while I have spoken about reducing dependence on trade, and I think your question also refers to the machinery, I think you also have to move towards start manufacturing the machinery that you import from China. Agreed, it will be more expensive, but you should have that preference given. And if you make it in India, I will buy more. So, for instance, in government procurement, preference can be given to make in India. In private procurement, we should say, I will prefer to buy from India. So, therefore, it is no point simply saying, I'll ban this or that. You have to raise your own competence to be able to ban this or that, so that you don't suffer from the consequence.
Thank you, sir. So we have a next question from Mr. Abhinash. If you can start your camera.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, Abhinash.
Okay. Hello. Yeah. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Avinash Medhi. I'm an engineer from Assam. So my question to all the panelists is that, do you think India can do much more than banning apps? For like, we know the MG Motors are subsidiary of SIAC Motors, of whose Nanjing Motors, another subsidiary, is associated with PLA. Cathay International Group with ex-India Steels, where few employees were previously convicted of espionage. Then Baidu, Tencent, currently working with the AI for or software technologies for PLA. So like, can we like our R&D companies or businesses, private business, can be associated with the defense sector? Like, would it boost the defense economy or like as a whole Indian economy, or will it be helpful? So that's my question.
So I think Kumawat sir and Gurjit Singh sir can only give this answer. Max, you and me are out of this. So that's a question. If I just rephrase in a way that, you know, like the defense companies which has been from China working in India on various parts. So can we have Indian companies to, you know, take up the step, one step ahead and take that step? So that's the question. And Kumar sir, how do you see that from the internal perspective? You know, like because there's a channel in which you can, you know, China can send spies and other people also inside. So.
This is a sensitive sectors that we have. I think we will have to be wary about our Chinese companies. And as you know, in this era, data is the actually prime thing which I think nations will use to control other nations. US has got, I think, data about most of the people of this world now, those who use smartphones and
Cambridge Analytica.
So I think these banned apps which have been banned, in case they impinge on our national security, I think it's a great decision, and we should find this an opportunity to have our own apps. And I was actually going through the media or print media that many apps have been, I think, made, you know, in last few weeks only. So I think we'll have to keep this in mind, what actually really impinges on our national security. That thing should remain with India. And right now, I think our own Prime Minister has given, you know, a call for our people to invest more in our defense sector. I think that should be further pursued, rather depending on, especially, I think we should have no dependence on China, and we cannot think of having for our defense requirement dependence on China. There we must be independent, and otherwise, whatever we get from other countries, even from US and Russia, I think it could be at great cost. So we must be self-sufficient in this sector.
So like Chinese businesses are mainly primarily associated with the army, like but Indian army is independent of politics or business. It functions on its own, and the funding and all it all comes from the government or government of India. So like my question is that, can we associate our private R&D companies or research and development or private businesses as associated with the defense sector? Can it be done, or will it be helpful?
I think that is the policy of the government. I think in case you approach those who are right now managing the, you know, show, I think they welcome this, what you have asked for. They will welcome, I think, in case you approach Defense Ministry and defense production sector.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Ambassador,
there are actually many companies, which private companies, which are involved in producing accessories for the defense, like special steel, things like that.
Yeah.
And now you see Larsen and Toubro, Mahindra, they are producing even self-propelled artillery or particular kind of vehicles required. But I think we better not talk too much about it, because once the Germans come to know, they will ban these companies from getting even normal technology, saying that they'll be putting it to defense use. So with each country, you got to work with it differently. But more seriously, today war is not fought by military alone. Cyber is a big war.
Yeah.
Perception is a big war. Media is a big war. So today, we have to make sure that Chinese companies, for instance, are not in the technology and development of the power sector in India. They are not running our airports. Ports they have been banned from. But we must keep them out of these important areas, because through cyber control, they can sabotage your entire infrastructure, roads. So that is where it is. See, when we ban the apps, I mean, the ban the app was actually a low-hanging fruit. It doesn't cause you any loss. But everything else, there will be an economic cost to you, which you should be ready to bear. But we have to understand that today the defense of the realm does not come only on the border. If all your hospitals, everything is dependent on cyber. So cyber security is very important. And today we know that China, North Korea are among the biggest users of cyber attacks. So therefore, we need to be careful all across the board, which something we have been lax in doing. Thank you.
So I think we will have a conclusion here, or we are almost on time. So it's the time we should need to. But before we conclude this, one last thought from all speakers. So what's your take on how one more point which they wants to add, if it is still remained? I hope the questions were actually very elaborate, so we would be able to cover most of it. But last thought from Kumawat sir, to start with.
I think I will conclude by saying China is aiming to have what we call Pax Sinica. What till now we had Pax Americana, means the world order according to American wish. Right now we are having, and China wishes to have Pax Sinica. Instead of that, I think we should think of Asian century. China is thinking of having this century, this 21st century, century of China. Instead of, it should be Asian century will be possible only in case we have peace in this region, in Asia. And that is possible in case we resolve the disputes that we have between these countries, these two great civilizations, because during the peace only progress is possible. Any nation which is involved in war cannot and will not have progress or development. So this is my concluding remarks about that. Both countries, both great civilizations must work for peace, and we'll have great future. We'll have great 21st century, and the century will be of century of Asia. Thank you.
Ambassador sir.
So we have today covered the strategic aspects of geopolitics, and we have covered the economic aspects. Let me also say that one of the things China is doing is that China is very uncomfortable with the rise of India. So since India has become member of G20, we have civilian nuclear agreement with the United States, and there are many things happening. The Chinese have become very discomforted. And they do not have this adjust kar lo, no, I can adjust approach, which we have. They want my way, that's it. So as a result, they are stopping India's entry into the UN Security Council. They're stopping India's entry into the NSG. They're stopping India's entry into APEC. Wherever they can, they will stymie. So this, we have tried from 1988 to 2020 for a rise of both countries. Dr. Manmohan Singh used to say, there is enough space in the world for India and China to grow. But the Chinese don't see that. So therefore, I believe that India and Europe, particularly France and Germany, can be the real precursors for a new world order, which is stable and multilateral, which will not allow the kind of unilateralism that both Washington and Beijing want.
Very well said, sir. Max, your take on that?
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Vishnu. Actually, I did not like the title of this webinar, which was "Can India Leverage on Anti-China Sentiment?" And I strongly and firmly believe that it can, but it should not. Let me just quickly explain. There should never be any policy that exploits hostile sentiments for whatever reason, because once you start doing this, it's easy that they get out of control. And the India I know is above such an approach. The India I know has always been a very peaceful country, a country that respects everybody, that respects pluralism, that respects the rule of law, that does not want to heat up sentiments against any other country. Peace is always the main driver. This is also why India and Europe have always seen each other as natural partners. This has kind of decreased a little in recent years, and now the term has come up again. And I fully agree with the ambassador that the axis of Europe and India could very well be at the center of a new multilateral world that ensures the rule of law and peace, basically in this century. We hardly touched upon a few aspects. This could have gone on forever, like technology standards. We mentioned them, but this is a different debate. So let's just keep in mind that if we really enter into like a new phase of global competition between systems, where China is on the one end of the spectrum and other countries at the other, the only thing that will win in the long run, just like in the Cold War, is that domestic innovation, domestic success, and domestic growth will be what makes a country or strong in the longer run. And this is what we all should try and aim for together by cooperating as much as we can. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Max. I would like to extend my thanks to all the speakers and conclude in a way where Kumawat sir has stated that the webinar, it's a good way or medium to connect to the people who are still at home. And I'll extend the next word, which was said by Ambassador Gurjit Singh sir, that we need to choose the right kind of webinars because that's a influx of so many which has been going on. I would say we had a decent one. We will be able to learn a lot. Personally speaking, I have learned from three of you and those topics which we normally just listen from or get information from WhatsApp media or social media, which I think somebody has rightly connoted WhatsApp University. So probably this is a good way to understand now what exactly the situation is, how the diplomacy work, how we should deal with it, and what is the things which we would look forward to many of these sessions in future with our panelists and our our participants who are able to join today. And there are other questions which has not been answered. So we being an inclusive organization, we would love to take each question. So I would request our panel speakers that we will forward you a few of the questions which has been raised, but we were not able to answer those because of the time constraint. So we will send a mail to you and try to get an answer and send it back to the people who have raised the questions.
Most welcome.
So thank you very much, sir, and have a nice day. And please be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank
Bye.
you,